close this door? So, can we close the door? Sometimes the kids, they play and make a lot of noise. Last time we had talked about those individuals who the Prophet ﷺ, or they will be turned away from the Prophet ﷺ, at the Hawd, right, at the lake of the Prophet ﷺ. And we said that the scholars had three general statements around who that is and who that entails. So do you guys remember? So those individuals who will be turned away, or you don't know what they changed after you. All right, the munafiqeen. All right, good. That was one group. Yep. Those people who apostated after, right? So the munafiqeen. So there are three groups, right, that they had mentioned: the munafiqeen and the murtaddeen, right? Those people who didn't believe, and those people who turned back on their religion. And the second group. All right. So Ahl Bid'ah, right? So the people of innovation. And the third group was who? Those people who actually changed after the Prophet ﷺ. So like the Khawarij were from the innovators. So those people who they either left Islam or those people who left Islam after the Prophet ﷺ. So they were Muslim while he ﷺ was alive, and after he ﷺ passed, they left Islam. He said that these are the people who are intended in this hadith. So that was the last hadith that had to do this concerning the hadith of, we had talked about wudu, and there were signs that these individuals would have that indicate that they had the signs of wudu that they made in this world. يرحمك الله. قال المصنف رحمه الله تعالى قال حدثنا قتيبة بن سعيد قال حدثنا خلف يعني ابن خليفة عن أبي مالك الأشجعي عن أبي حازم قال كنت خلف أبي هريرة وهو يتوضأ للصلاة. So over here you had Khalf, one of the narrators. He says that is it Khalaf or Abu Hazim? No, I'm sorry, Abu Hazim. Abu Hazim, he was behind Abu Huraira, and he saw Abu Huraira getting ready for wudu. He saw Abu Huraira making wudu. فكان يمد يديه حتى يبلغ إبطه. So he said that he extended his hand until he reached his armpit, meaning that he did like his entire arm. فقلت له يا أبا هريرة. So he said to him, "Oh Abu Huraira, ما هذا الوضوء?" He said, what kind of wudu is this? And that you're going all the way up like this. فقال يا بني فروخ. He says, "Oh son of Farrukh, أنتم ها هنا." He says that, "Oh, you guys are here." Like meaning what? Like he didn't see them. He didn't notice them. لو علمت أنكم ها هنا ما توضأت هذا الوضوء. He said, had I known you were here, I wouldn't have made this wudu. سمعت خليلي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول. So I heard my beloved صلى الله عليه وسلم saying, تبلغ الحلية من المؤمن حيث يبلغ الوضوء, that the adornment of the mu'min reaches as far as his wudu reaches. So the more you extend your wudu, the more you are beautified. Why did Abu Hurairah say this?
Why did he say that he wouldn't have done this?
He's like, had I known you were here, I wouldn't have made this wudu.
Because it would have it would have made it a little more difficult for people.
Okay, that's a definite possibility. So if people saw this wudu, they would think what?
That's how you have to do it.
Right, this is how you have to do it. Right, this is the way that you have to make wudu.
You think it's you speaking directly to the Prophet?
No. So over here, this is, I'm assuming either outside of the presence of the Prophet or after the Prophet passed.
Because if I'm not mistaken, when Prophet was making wudu similar way after his muscle, Abu Hurairah was there too, right?
So there's another hadith, right? The earlier hadith. Remember?
He said the same thing. If I know, I wouldn't.
No. He didn't say that there. He said, هكذا رأيت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. He said, this is how I saw the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم making wudu. So what's interesting here is the way that Abu Hurairah responds to Abu Hazim, and he says to him, Ya Bani Farrukh. Now, this term, Farrukh is considered one of the sons of Ibrahim, alayhi salatu wasalam, and it usually applies to the Ajam. It usually applies to the non-Arabs. So anytime they would say this, like it was meant to, he's speaking to a non-Arab. So this gives us a little bit of insight into what you guys were saying, that the reason that he said that had I known you were here, I wouldn't have made this wudu, because he was worried that they would think that this is the obligatory way to make wudu. And he told them, and by him telling them that, he's saying what? By him saying that, oh, had I known you were here, I wouldn't have made wudu like this.
That means you don't have to do it the way I'm doing it.
So basically, the way you saw me doing it,
You don't have to do it.
you don't have to do it that way.
Is it like similar to when Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, if I had known, I would have ordered you guys to
Yeah.
every time? If it's not
Yes,
muscular?
he says,
Can you take it a similar way?
yes, you can. So where the Prophet ﷺ, he said, لولا أشك على أمتي what do you say? لولا أشك على أمتي لافترضت السواك عند كل وضوء يعني أو كما قال. So he said, like, had I not thought it was a difficulty for my ummah, I would have obligated them to use siwak for every salah. So over here, he's telling us the importance of it, how much he loved it, how much he thought that individuals should do it, but it's not something he wanted to obligate on others. And similarly, over here, Abu Huraira, he's saying that, man, had I known you were here, I would have made the regular wudu, because I don't want you guys to think that this is the obligatory way to do it. قال حدثنا يحيى ابن أيوب وقتيبة وابن حجر جميعا عن إسماعيل بن جعفر قال ابن أيوب قال حدثنا إسماعيل قال أخبرني العلاء عن أبيه عن أبي هريرة أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال. So over here you have another narration of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. He's narrating that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, ألا أدلكم على ما يمحو الله به الخطايا ويرفع به الدرجات. He said, should I not show you, and this is Abu Hurairah speaking, saying the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, that should I not show you that which will wipe away your deeds and raise your rank? قالوا بلى. They said, absolutely. Ya Rasulullah, O Messenger of Allah. قال إسباغ الوضوء على المكاره. He says that making a complete wudu even when it is difficult. وكثرة الخطى إلى المساجد. And he said that taking many steps to the masjid. وانتظار الصلاة بعد الصلاة. And waiting from one salah to the next. فذلكم الرباط. And this is, يعني, he said ribat means like, and this will keep you tied. Tied to what?
Each other.
Possibly. To your faith, right? This is something that will keep you tied to your faith, because how does he introduce this whole discussion? He says, shall I not tell you that which will what? Right? Remove your deed, will erase your bad deeds and raise your rank. فَذَلِكُمُ الرِّبَاطِ. And this will keep you tied to reward, right? Tied to blessings, tied to, like any of these things could come into play. So over here he starts by saying إسباغ الوضوء على المكاره. He says that making wudu even when difficult. How is that possible? When would it be difficult to make wudu? When it's cold, right? When it's cold, right? When it's cold, it's difficult to make wudu. So he's saying that making wudu completely is something that we already know based on previous hadith that wipes away your deeds. But when it is cold, it is right. It's especially pertinent, and there's a special reward for an individual who does that. قال حدثني إسحاق بن موسى الأنصاري قال حدثنا معن قال حدثنا مالك حاوى تحويل الإسناد وحدثنا محمد بن المثنى قال حدثنا محمد بن جعفر قال حدثنا شعبة جميعا عن العلاء بن عبد الرحمن بهذا الإسناد. So similar isnad to the previous. وليس في حديث شعبة ذكر الرباط, except Shu'bah in his narration he doesn't mention فذلكم الرباط, يعني that you are tied. He only mentions the beginning that these are ways to wipe away your bad deeds and raise your rank. في حديث مالك ثنتين. So, but Malik, he adds in his narration that the Prophet ﷺ said this 2 more times. So he didn't say فذلكم الرباط. He said it فذلكم الرباط, ذلكم الرباط, ذلكم الرباط. That by this means you will be tied, yani you'll be tied to the reward, or you'll be tied to the raising of your rank. So over here, when the Prophet ﷺ, he said that which will wipe away your good deeds. Scholars, they have wipe away your bad deeds, I'm sorry. The scholars have multiple explanations for this and what is intended by this. So what do we associate wiping away bad deeds with? What are the steps that we usually have to take? We usually have to repent. So when the Prophet ﷺ is telling us that an individual whose deeds are wiped away, this is essentially a way for an individual to gain Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure. This is a way for him to wipe away his bad deeds without taking those specific steps of tawbah. Because normally, if I want my bad deeds to be wiped away, what do I have to do? I have to make istighfar, I have to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why is it that in this situation that is not necessary, and what lesson can we learn from that?
You mean these steps will...
So making wudu, right? So here, what are the three things he mentions? Making wudu, taking a lot of steps to the masjid, and waiting from one salah to the next.
I mean, obviously, these steps will take away certain types of sins, right? Not like...
Okay, that's an important point.
Right? It's like...
The intention is there to do the right thing.
Right, so the intention to do good, right, and to do good deeds, absolutely. So, and like I said, yeah. All right, you're in a state of dhikr, right? So, being in a state of dhikr, and this is a lesson that we can all take, right? So, being in a state of dhikr, or being even in a state of wudu, or even sometimes waiting, these are things that we don't normally associate with.
I mean, if you're doing all those things, you're not doing the other things, the bad things, you're not talking,
Okay.
you're not backbiting.
Sure.
In general.
Sure.
Busy with the good stuff.
Yeah. So, when an individual is busy with good,
You're,
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will continue to bless them, yeah.
these aren't things you would associate with the shaitan.
Right, these aren't things that you associate with shaitan. And not just that, if I'm sitting in the masjid waiting for the next salah, is it something that we would think that would bring an active reward? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like these are things that basically the Prophet ﷺ is telling us, like even the small things that you do are not overlooked. And here to the point where taking a number of steps to the masjid, okay, well, what if I shorten my steps? Is that what's intended there? Like if I take like really short steps, what's the intention here?
Doing an active, conscious effort.
Right, to get to the masjid, right? And I should make that effort getting to the masjid. And in all of these things, there's like an active intention that's there, reminding ourselves what it is that we're doing. Because, like reminding ourselves that while I'm making wudu, like even though it's cold, why am I making this wudu? Right, and that's an important point. Because sometimes, like while we're making wudu, if I remember that I'm getting extra reward while it's cold, is the cold going to bother me as much? No, not really. Or the other thing is like, okay, if I can't find a parking space close to the masjid, or if I live a little bit farther, if I know that I get extra reward for taking those extra few steps, what happens? Right, it motivates you. And if you look at all these things individually, right, these are just different ways for a person to be motivated to do those good deeds. Right, if I'm waiting in the masjid and it's like, oh man, there's about a half hour or 40 minutes until the next prayer. Right, right. So it's like I might as well. Why? Because I'm going to get extra reward for these things. And these are just all different ways and different methods that the Prophet ﷺ uses to motivate us to do good deeds for things that we don't normally associate with like being rewarded for that time, for that period. And we will get to when we get to Kitab al-Salah, when we get to the book of prayer. There are very famous hadith that I'm sure all of you know, where the Prophet ﷺ said, the one who prays in reward, he receives 22, 25, 27, right? There are different narrations that talk about the different amount of reward. And one of the reasons is because of all the steps an individual takes to that, right? So he gets up, he makes wudu, he walks to the masjid, he prepares for the, like he's getting into that mental state for that. And it's not just the prayer in jama'ah, right? It's not just the prayer in congregation. It's the entire process, which is why a person gets a multiplied reward. So remembering that, and these are things that should motivate us. And, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to benefit from these and continue to motivate. But over here, Imam al-Nawawī, he says that ribat, it means كَأَنَّهُ حَبَسَ نَفْسَهُ عَلَى هَذِهِ الطَّاعَةِ. It's as if he tied himself to these good deeds. Right? So when the Prophet ﷺ mentions being tied, He said that being tied actually means being tied to these good deeds. The next hadith, قال حدثنا قتيبة بن سعيد وعمر الناقد والزهير بن حرب قالوا حدثنا سفيان ابن أبي الزناد عن الأعرج عن أبي هريرة عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لولا أن أشق على المؤمنين وفي حديث زهير على أمتي لأمرتهم بالسواك عند كل صلاة. So this is a hadith we just spoke about, right? Like a few minutes ago. That had it not been difficult on the believers, in the hadith of Zubair, على أمتي, on my nation, I would have ordered them to make siwak for every prayer. So what do we take from this hadith? What can we learn about siwak? What can we learn about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam? And what does siwak mean? Toothstick is according to the Shafi'is. So it's basically oral hygiene, right? So the Shafi'is, they do say that there's a specific reward in using the stick in and of itself. The other madhahib, they say any type of oral hygiene, anything with bristles that is used to clean the mouth, that is what is intended here, not the tool in and of itself. What do we learn? So what do we learn about oral hygiene in Islam? It's revolutionary. Allahu Akbar.
For instance, right?
I'm sorry?
You turn food, it turns away.
Right. So you have other hadiths that talk about not eating onions, right? Why?
Because it turns angels away.
Right. It turns the angels away. Even going to the masjid, what happens? Like when there's a smell, like when there's a smell of food, right? It bothers other people. So this entire idea of oral hygiene. Okay. Well, why is it so important? Because even the siwak during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, yes, it's something that would clean teeth. There's no doubt about that. Okay, did it prevent like?
You're about to go in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're about to.
Sure.
It's obviously want to be at your
So
best.
part of the preparation in front of going in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not just making wudu, not just being clean, not just dressing nicely, but also.
Remembering who you're going to, remembering like.
Absolutely. Okay. So it's a preparation to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like what else?
What if you're about to recite?
Right, so you're going to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in very specific ways, right? So either you're going to be reciting, or you will be reciting Quran, and you'll be reciting different adhkar and different dua, right? So you want to make sure that your mouth is clean as possible for that. What else?
The Prophet knew that the fitna that was coming would cause the corruption of food, so the oral hygiene is necessary
No.
to maintain.
Okay, possibly. It's possible that he sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw that there was an issue with the food, but that wouldn't explain why he ordered them to do it at that time. Right? Because they were growing food then. They didn't have issues like they didn't have like GMO, right? You know what I mean? They didn't have KFC. I mean, you know what I mean? Sometimes Allah blesses us in different ways. But like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Simply as the rock in your teeth.
Okay, because I'm saying like, listen, even if you use the toothstick, does it fight plaque?
Yes.
Not really, right? There was a time where I was more, mashallah, you know what I mean? And I used to use like siwak only. Then I went to the dentist. I had a lot of plaque. I had like a lot of plaque. So the front of my teeth were clean, but you can't really, right? you don't have like a U-shaped siwak, right? Or you can like get back there.
This is custom made.
Right? Is that I should think I should force the tree to grow that way, like take from the roots. So it comes from the arak tree. You know where you actually get the siwak from?
Some trees are the.
It's from a tree. The tree is the one that was used during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, it was called the arak tree. It's something that's still used today, and people still have it. And you can get them freshly. They have them like vacuum sealed now, and you can purchase them and you can use them. What part of the tree is it?
From the base.
It's the roots. It's actually the roots of the tree. I used to think it was like you just break it off and like, but it's actually the roots because that's the only way to explain the moistness, right? Because the twig itself is never going to be moist; it's always going to be dry. But the roots, because they're underground, it makes sense that they would be wet. And the best siwak for the Prophet ﷺ, and he said very clearly, the best siwak that he enjoyed was the one that was the most moist, right? And the one that was because that was the one that was the most fresh. what does the siwak do? Like, so if we even go back to the time of the Prophet ﷺ, you have the siwak. Like I said, in general, and again, this is just my anecdotal experience, right? Like I haven't done like a vast survey on people who do siwak and their health.
Like a good smell.
There's a smell, right? There's a smell that's associated with the siwak, and that smell is definitely better than
what's
right. Right then, if our mouth has a bad smell, the siwak is significantly better, right? It's much more tolerable, sometimes even pleasant. And he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in addition to using siwak, what else did he like? He said that there were two things that were made beloved to him in this world. What were they?
Perfume and salah.
Perfume. So the end of the hadith says, وَجُعِلَتْ قُرَّةُ عَيْنِي فِي الصَّلَاةِ. Before that, he mentioned something else. Huh? So he said, no problem. So he says that حُبِّبَ إِلَيِّ مِن دُنْيَاكُمْ الطِّيبُ النِّسَاءِ. He said that the two things that have been made beloved to me, and even that wording, it shows his distancing from the dunya, right? So he said, what has been made beloved to me from your dunya, right? So he's distancing himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not saying that I love these things, right? He's saying that he tries to keep a distance from the dunya, but even with that distance, there are two things that have come to him. Al-tib nisa. He said that tib is like perfume and women. So he said these two things in this world have been made beloved to me. So this theme of cleanliness, this theme of hygiene, this theme of smelling nice, all of these things, they do what for the person? It makes a person more attractive, right? For sure. How close do we want to be with someone who has like really strong BO? Or how close do we want to be with someone who has like really strong, like maybe they just cooked, right? Those smells, they're actually repulsive, right? You don't actually want to be near that person versus somebody who has like a nice smell, right? Or somebody who wears perfume, or somebody, who just put on itar, or somebody who even just looks clean, right? So if you have two people, mashallah. He's ready to go. Like so a person who looks clean, we're a lot more comfortable being around that person. None for the sisters.
You're back.
So you have this idea of, and if I am attractive to who? To other people. And this goes back to this concept of I do all these things because not only will I be standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'll also be what? I'll be dealing with others. Right? And one of the things the Prophet ﷺ, he tells us, right? So all of the characteristics that we try to embody, whether it be generosity or courage or kindness, I can't have any of those characteristics if nobody is around. Right? It's impossible. How do I know if I'm kind if I'm alone? How do I know if I'm generous if I'm alone? How do I know if I'm courageous if I'm alone in my room? And even the Prophet ﷺ, he said that the one sabra ala adha nas. He said that the one who is patient with the difficulty of the people is better than the one who removes himself. And you have other hadith from him sallallahu alaihi wasallam where he tells the Bedouins very specifically. He said, listen, don't go back to a Bedouin lifestyle after you come to the city. And why? Because Islam is very metropolitan, right? It's a very social religion. Is it impermissible for me to like move away and live in a farm by myself? No, it's not. The Prophet ﷺ, what is he telling us and encouraging us? He's like, listen, it's better to what? Be around other people. Be with community. Because it is through community that I'm able to seek advice. It is through community that I'm able to seek help. It is through community that I'm able to express those characteristics that the Prophet ﷺ commands us to embody. If I'm sitting on my farm alone, right, and I have my cows and my chickens, like that's great, right? You know what I mean? Like I think some of us have that, fantasy, like, man, I just want to get off the grid and I want to do all these things. But what happens after time is you get lonely, right? And that's real. Like being lonely is a huge problem, and not just that. If I'm alone and I'm facing something, if I'm alone and I'm having difficulty, how often can we get ourselves out of those situations? It's hard, man. It's hard, sometimes impossible, right? If I am alone, I have to be around others. Like I have to, right? This is something that's really important, and it's amazing. Like the encouragement of going to Salat al-Jama'ah at the least, right? At the least, I'm obligated to go to the masjid how often a week? Once. At the least, right? You know what I mean? This is the least that I'm going and I'm socially interacting and dealing with. I'm forced, right? I'm forced to go and deal and interact with people on Friday. Why? Because I have to stay connected to community. And if I want to stay connected to community, well, guess what part of the manners are in dealing with community? Making sure that I'm hygienic, making sure that I'm clean, making sure that I smell nice, right? These things are so fundamentally important. Because we never want to be in a position where we're turning people away, right? Or people don't want to talk to us, or people are scared of us, or, you know, oh, people think I'm weird, or people think I'm scary, or people, no. If people think that, I need to change. I have to. Like, I am obligated to change. And I'm not saying that we allow others to dictate our lives, right? That's not what I'm saying at all. But I have to be aware of society. I have to be aware of the culture. I have to be aware of my surroundings. Yes?
But what of, like, you know, people sometimes have misconceptions, you know,
Sure.
that you shouldn't try to cater to. Like,
Yeah.
people see a woman in abaya and
Mhm.
you know, niqab, and
Yeah.
they think this person is scary, right?
Sure.
Or like even a Muslim man dressed sunnah style, like
Yeah.
they have all these assumptions, and I don't think that, you know, one thing is to be a friendly person and approachable, but not to like try to cater towards those misconceptions.
Sure. And we can talk about dress. Dress is something that's really important. I had a conversation once, and I'm not here to convince anyone. I'm just sharing anecdotal stories, where I had someone, he had come to me and he was like, we should dress Islamically. So I said, okay, what does that look like? And I said, okay, are you talking about like the shalwar qameez that Pakistanis wear? I was like, well, actually that's a Sikh outfit. Sikhs wear that. And I was like, or are you talking about like a thobe like this? Like, and I was like, well, Christian farmers wear this too. I was like, or let's go back to the time of the Prophet ﷺ. I was like, are you talking about dressing like Abu Lahab and Abu Jahl? Because the Prophet ﷺ didn't criticize what they were wearing. And like, I'm not like on either end of the spectrum, right? In the sense that I know there are some people who are like, okay, well, we should try to make our clothing as Western as possible while maintaining, like everybody says maintain the Sharia guidelines. I want to be very clear, right? Nobody's saying to violate them. But there are some who say, okay, well, we should try to be as Western as possible as our dress because it doesn't make sense to go out of our way to stand out. And then there are some people who are like, no, there's a very specific Islamic identity that I feel has to be presented. I'm not like, I don't have like I don't have skin in the game either way. Like, I'm an imam, like, so I'm going to dress very Eastern most of the time. So I think either side really has an argument for that. And if, let me put it this way. If I'm dressed like this and I go to the Midwest in a town where I know there are no Muslims, I should expect people to treat me differently. I mean, sure, but I'm saying, putting that aside, like putting the prejudices and things aside, is it fair for me to introduce something completely foreign to someone else, right? Without expecting a response, or without expecting at least a side eye or like, you know, a non-comprehension.
And I think that, like, you know, if that kind of thing is expected, and that especially in places that aren't exposed to people that are different from them, but even here, you know, a man could just have the beard or would
Sure.
solely be wearing the hijab.
Sure.
Like if you're doing things that are kind of, you know, maybe if you want to think about one thing making you identifiable as Muslim, people still may have judgment for that. So I think my concern is like some people feeling so much the need to be appealing is never going to be enough, right? Because
Sure.
we fundamentally are different.
No, even a less, yeah.
Sometimes that representation can actually make a good impression.
It can, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَن تَرْضَى عَنْكَ الْيَهُودُ وَالنَّصَارَى حَتَّى تَتَّبِعَ مِلَّتَهُم. Right? Like the Yahud and Nasara, they will never be pleased with you until you follow their religion. And the idea here isn't to please people. We as Muslims, we have a very distinct identity. There's no doubt about that. And even when I said, like, even people who say we should dress more Western, in what you still have to maintain Sharia guidelines, whatever that might be. And for the woman, at the least, right, it'll be loose-fitting clothing and a hijab. It doesn't matter what she does. She's always going to be distinct. She's always going to stand out. And the amazing thing with hijab, anyway, is that you know what type of people have to wear hijab? So the non-Muslim woman, she's not expected to wear hijab. The slave woman, she's not expected to wear hijab. You know what woman is supposed to wear hijab? The one who is free and the one who is Muslim. It is a sign of honor for her. Like the moment she wears a hijab, she's telling the world, I am two things. And it's so ironic, right? The fact that she's free, that she's a free woman, she's not a slave, and the fact that she is Muslim. This is an announcement to the world. Men don't have anything that parallels that. But there's nothing wrong. Like, we will always have our identity. There are certain things that we'll not be able to participate in, period, right? It doesn't matter. Like, I cannot get to a point where it's okay for me to eat pork or drink alcohol. That's never going to happen, inshallah, right? Or we can never get to a point where, like, oh, well, you know, in the car dealer circle, it's okay to lie, so when I'm in that crowd, I should start lying, right? Or if I'm a lawyer, it's okay to, you know, do certain things or involve myself. No. We will always be principled. Alaikum salam. We'll always be principled. But I wasn't talking about changing to the point where I'm now undermining my principles. That shouldn't even be like a topic for discussion. I'm talking about just being aware of certain societal norms, because there are certain things I don't have to violate, right? Even though they might be part of some Eastern cultures, because they're going to be looked at as strange. And I'm already drawing attention to myself, which is fine, right? You know, there's things that we all do and we're going to. Like, if I pray publicly, I can't be like, oh, you know, well, people are going to look at me. It's like, yeah, obviously. I mean, they're going to look. It's something that's strange. I have no problem expecting that. And even I myself, like when I pray publicly, it's uncomfortable, but we still do it because we have to pray. But at the end of the day, as long as we're not undermining our principles, I feel it's okay to cater as long as we don't get to that line. And like I said, the reason is like we want to be appealing without losing our identity. Does that make sense? Right? Like we want to be appealing to each other. We want to be appealing to society, because anytime a Muslim goes into a space, the people who are in that space, they should think like, oh, alhamdulillah, it's a Muslim, right? You know, they should be happy that the Muslim is entering that space. Is like, you know, man, I like dealing with Muslims. They're always honest. You know, they're principled. They do this, and it's amazing the spaces. Like I've actually seen, like in sometimes those spaces, like whether it be corporate or whether it be political, like spaces that are very, very tribal, right? Like, you know, political and corporate spaces, extremely tribal spaces. In the moment that there's a Muslim who's principled enters those spaces, it's like everybody's happy. Right? You know, they're like actually genuinely happy. It's like, you know why? Because it's like, man, this person is actually going to be genuine. This person is not going to play games with me. This person is going to deal with me directly. This person, regardless of what happens, I know that this person is going to be honest. All right? And people enjoy that. Right? People enjoy because they're so tired of the navigation of the relationships that they have, that it's so refreshing to go to somebody who's straightforward and honest and upright. You were going to say something?
Yeah, I guess we were trying on the topic of making Islam appealing or attractive to people as part of the physical and then the character aspects. So I guess the sister's question was regarding more of like, as you mentioned, the prejudices that you can't really control, that people don't know.
It's okay, man.
But
Yeah.
for the aspects of representing Islam, that's something that was always like growing up, like we're role models, we have to represent Islam.
Sure.
So
But
it's kind of difficult sometimes.
I'm saying like role models, and what does that mean, right? I think exactly, right? Do I care if somebody starts wearing a thobe? Like, have I made any change in their life? If somebody like, or you know what? Let's take it even further. A non-Muslim woman who starts wearing hijab, she's like, man, I like the sense of security and safety that it gives me, so I put on this hijab. Have I benefited her in any way? Not really. I would rather benefit her with my character and the fact that she accepts Islam, right? That ultimately that's what we want. Like ultimately what we want is we want people to embrace the religion. We want people to come to the realization that Islam is the best choice in terms of a way of life that you want to live. This is the way. Like that we have the golden ticket. And we want people to see that. But if people see that I'm disheveled, I'm unkempt, right? They see that I don't take care of my home, I don't take care of my yard. You know, people see that like my kids are cutting in front of everyone to go get food, right? Like these aren't good examples to set. Like good examples is like, okay, those same kids getting up and they're seeing somebody elderly and it's like, yeah, they went in the front of the line, but all of a sudden you see them taking that food to go somebody elderly who's sitting down, right? It's so refreshing to see those things. But if you see like, you know, yelling and screaming and fighting and blah, 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 and it's like, yo, what, these guys are wild. That's not the image that we want to give off. And there's no reason to. Like I know we're better than that. Like 100%, yeah.
I think it kind of comes from the sense of like feeling alien, so you kind of like downplay the opinions of other people in the wrong way.
Well, and not just, there's arrogance that's there. It's like, oh, they're kuffar anyway.
Yeah.
And that's a huge problem, because at the end of the day, do I have the ability to point out who's going to heaven and hell? I can't guarantee it for myself, let alone speaking about others. So who am I to look down? What if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides this person one day? What excuse do I have then?
Isn't the hadith of the two friends and the one who like never prayed or did practice, and the other one who was righteous, but on the day of judgment, Allah, some of the angels have said the righteous one to judgment.
So I'm not familiar with this specific narration. There's another one where the Prophet ﷺ, he said that a person will do the deeds of the people of paradise until he is one handspan from entering it. Then he will say something that will flip his destiny and he will go into the hellfire. He said, and there's another person who does the deeds of the people of hellfire until he's one handspan from entering it, and then he will say a good word, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will enter him into his paradise. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from the people of paradise. At the end of the day, man, like you don't know people's intention, right? Like we don't know our end. Like, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from nifaq and protect us from kufr and protect us from, like, you know, all these things. It's just like we hope that we do good deeds as a sign and as a means that, man, this is a sign that I'm on the right path, right? The fact that I'm able to fix my flaws, the fact that I recognize them, the fact that I'm working on them, the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues to give me opportunities to pray and to fast, like those are the ways that we should be encouraged, right? Like we see that Allah gives us these opportunities, and we keep taking advantage of those opportunities, and that's great. Like, you know, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the good end. I mean, but like I know, like, I didn't mean to go on too much of a rant, but presentation is important. Like, it's so fundamentally important. When we go out, there's no excuse. There's no excuse for us not to look presentable at all. And I'm not saying, oh, like, I know that there are like some mashayikh and stuff. It's like, oh, you know, it's like you're standing in front of Allah 5 times a day. What'd you do with the CEO and blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, I understand, like, you know, the point that they're trying to make. Be presentable. That's all. Allah is not saying to go put on your best outfit, you know, every time you stand to pray. He's saying, okay, but at least try to look nice, right? Look presentable when you stand in front of Allah. And sometimes it doesn't take a lot, yeah.
I mean, you can do it even within Islamic intention.
Yeah.
The fact you mentioned earlier, you know, if you live on a farm, you won't have help, right? So that's one problem. But also, you're removing the opportunity from having an impact on this world. Like,
absolutely.
Bringing about change from interacting with people, which
Yeah.
is another reason. And you won't be able to have that impact if you don't create that space for people to approach you or to talk with you if you're not presentable.
Absolutely, 100%. Like, there's no reason for us to turn people away. And it's amazing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, لو كنت فظ غليظ القلب لانفض من حولك. Like, had you been hard-hearted, like, this is amazing. Just the hard heart, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, had you had just this hard heart, then people would have turned away from you. It's amazing how such a small description can give us insight, and that's all it takes for people to turn away from us. Like, if people see sternness, if people see hardness, like they don't want to talk to you, right? They don't deal, like, we don't want to deal with that person. It's like, Oh, well, yeah, what about that person? Oh man, that person, like, dude, they're so difficult to talk to. They're so hard. You know what I mean? Like, they're very rough, and like, you avoid them.
Especially in Ramadan.
Oh man, man, it sounds like there's some personal trauma there. No, Allah protect us. Like during Ramadan, I'll give people a small excuse, right? That they're usually hungry, thirsty, and like tired. So like, you know, people are just generally cranky. But I think we need to remind ourselves of why we're doing those things. I'm not benefiting anyone else with my fast. Yeah.
So I think this is part of a larger topic about like dealing with non-Muslims and the opposite gender in public situations like school or work.
Sure.
That seems like a longer discussion.
So there are a number of guidelines that come into play, right? So having a discussion around gender guidelines, I think that is definitely a separate discussion, inshallah, and we can have that another time. But at the end of the day, like I said, be at least the first step is to be presentable, right? That's the first step. You know, maintain your oral hygiene, smell nice, dress appropriately. That's it. And I think it's a very simple rule for us to follow in our lives. So based on this hadith, it's very clear that what is the hukm of using siwak? Recommended. And this is by ijma', right? There is an agreement on this. And why? Because the hadith is so clear, right? It's one of those hadith that is extremely clear in his Prophet ﷺ's wording. He said, I wanted to obligate it. I wanted to obligate it, but I knew it would be difficult, so I'm not going to, right? I'm going to recommend it, and this is why you have ijma' on this issue. So when he sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, I would have ordered them to make siwak for every prayer. How often should an individual clean their teeth? 5 times a day. Allahu Akbar.
6 times a day.
6 times a day. To go to the dentist daily. Okay. So you have a number of different statements concerning this issue. The 5 prayers are clear from the hadith, right? So he said, because I would have ordered them for every prayer. And the salat, that's one statement. The other one is every time an individual makes wudu, that they should make use siwak. Anytime he goes to read Quran, right, he should do that, right? These are the different times that an individual is recommended to do that. When he wakes up from sleep, and anytime he eats something. So when he eats something and the smell changes, then he should try to use the siwak. And again, remember, the idea is to be attractive. The idea is to prepare oneself for the recitation of the Quran, prepare oneself for engagement with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we should try to do that in the best position possible.
Sorry, is that recitation of the Quran referred to sitting down to recite it, or just reciting it in any circumstance?
Any circumstance. Yeah. But like I said, these are times in general that is recommended. Meaning that if sometimes I don't,
Like if you're walking on the street.
that's okay. Yeah, that's fine. It's not a big deal.
That's good to know. What's the absolute minimum?
Absolute minimum? Wallahu a'lam, ya akhi. I don't, because it's something that's recommended, it's not something you can obligate on people, right? I would say there are certain things, and when we're gonna come to it when we talk about Sunan al-Fitra, like those things that the Prophet ﷺ recommended that we do regularly. So what are those things? Like, plucking the armpit hair, shaving the private hair, cutting the nails. Okay, how often? You know what I mean? Like, it's very subjective, right? It's very subjective. I would say that if you take it at the least threshold, that every time you feel you need to. Right. I think that's like the minimum threshold. Maximum can be, right? You know what I mean? Like he gave like 5 different situations where it's recommended to use siwak here. So at the end of the day, you can do it how often you want. What is the here, you know what? This is a good question. What is the uppermost limit?
When it becomes so obsessive.
Right, when you start getting obsessive, right? Because why? Why is that a problem?
Because then you feel like you're obligated.
That's part of it, huh?
You can't function.
You can't function. So we had mentioned this before, that the upper threshold for any action is it when it becomes prohibitive to your life. Like if it gets to a point where I actually cannot function, I cannot live my life, then I need to scale back. And how much do I need to scale back? I need to scale back significantly. because now it's come to a point where it's not actually allowing me to meaningfully worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
So then he gets into a discussion about the one who is fasting. So he's saying that for the Shafi'is, an individual should not use the siwak after zawal al-shams. So when the sun reaches its peak, then after that an individual should not use siwak out of fear of something entering his stomach, or out of fear of swallowing something. He's saying that, okay, well, what are some of the things that you can use for the siwak? He said that what is recommended is from the arak tree, right? So we said that there's something that's very specific that's recommended from the arak tree that an individual can use. But he says essentially anything can be used for oral hygiene. So anything that has bristles, anything that is rough. He says that even a rag, so like even if you have like a rough rag, you can use that. Anything basically that will work is reasonable. So over here he mentions something I'm not 100% sure, but I want to go back, because he says here that if an individual uses their finger, does it count? And what's interesting, he says like it depends. If they have like soft, if their finger is soft, it doesn't count. But if they have rough, if they have rough fingers, then it does. So.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's just funny. Like some of the discussions, they're just really funny. And he's like, yeah. So if they have like, yeah.
When it's fasting?
No. This is just in general. So because the question was that, what can I use to clean my mouth? So he said that what is recommended, and again, this is for the Shafi'is, is that if you take the root of the arak tree, like that is the best thing, and that is what is recommended. He's saying, but you can also use like a rag, like if anything with a rough edge, you can use to clean your teeth.
But what about the timing?
Oh, the timings. Oh, the timings. So he's saying that the time that's mentioned in the hadith, the salah, that's one that's agreed upon, that this is recommended for every prayer. He's saying that every time an individual makes wudu, it's also recommended. He says that any time an individual reads Quran, it's also recommended. He says that when an individual wakes up from sleep, that time it is also recommended. And he says the fifth time is that if you feel that the smell has changed of your mouth, then at that time is also recommended.
I thought you said after the sun reaches.
Oh no, this is for for the one who's fasting. Yeah, so the one who's fasting, then that person for the Shafi'is, he should not use it after the sun has reached its peak. So basically after Dhuhr. So once Dhuhr comes in, the Shafi'is, they say it's makruh, it's disliked. Because you're fasting and they fear that something might enter your mouth, and before that time it's still considered relatively early in the day, and it makes sense to use it because when does our breath usually change? In the morning. Allahu Alam. I don't know. Like I said, it's just guidelines and just recommendations. He says that there are three opinions considering using the finger. Some of them say that it's okay. Some of them say it's not okay. And some of them say it's only okay if you can't find something else to clean your teeth with. So just keep that in mind. How do you use the siwak? There's a lot of details around that, but I'm sure all of you know how to brush your teeth, alhamdulillah.
Actually,
I feel like it's like an ad for a dentist office.
Right.
most people go like this, and you're supposed to go like that.
So which one is preferred?
I said most people go
Yeah.
go
So
like this, but we are supposed to go
that's
like
the way to do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because when you go like this, you clean the gums.
Okay. Let's now I'm curious to what he says. So he says, وَيَسْتَحَبْ أَنْ يَمُرَّ السِّوَاكَ أَيْضًا عَلَى طَرَفَ أَسْنَانِهِ. So he's saying that it should be on the flat of the teeth. وَكَرَاسِيَ وَأَضْرَاسِ. So he's saying that all of the teeth need to be covered. وَسَقْفْ حَلْقِهِ إِمْرَارًا لَطِيفًا. And he's saying that even the back of your throat, he's like, clean that too. وَيَسْتَحَبْ أَنْ يَبْدَأَ فِي سِوَاكِهِ بِالْجَانِبِ الْأَيْمَنِ مِنْ فِيهِ. So he says that it's recommended to start from the right side. ولا بأس باستعمال سواك غيره بإذنه. He says it's permissible to use somebody else's siwak. Yeah, that's interesting. See, so what's interesting here is that I use my wife's without her permission. ويستحب.
That's it? No. Oh, yo, bro.
It says, ويستحب أن يعود الصبي السواك ليعتادوا. So he says that also in preparing the siwak for a child, that this is something that is also recommended. But and the last thing we'll close with this, inshallah, is one of the benefits of this is rifqat al-Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that his kindness and his softness toward the ummah, and that he didn't want to do anything that would be difficult for them. He actually wanted to make things easy for them, which is why he made it very clear, right? So it's something that he enjoyed doing, something that he wanted to encourage others to do, but he was also very careful in how he worded certain things and how he said certain things, because he was worried about us. But we'll stop here, inshallah. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqin wa nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Inshallah, the tazkiyah class will be after Salat al-Isha.